Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 8, Episode 52, overall 437 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, as well as a selection of electric vehicles and Cadillacs as well. You can call the dealership at 519-824 0210 and tell them Chris Palme sent you. And you can also email the dealership at info@barrycullen.com. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show is on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, weeknights from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. I hope everyone's doing well on this Monday, September 30th, 2024, on the eve of the Major League Baseball playoffs. And of course, I'm wearing orange today, and the Detroit Tigers shocked everybody by going 31-13 in their last 44 games, winning 86 games, and now are facing the Houston Astros tomorrow in game one of their three-game best-of-3 wild card series against the Houston Astros. I have a special guest on tonight. This is his third appearance. His name is Greg Eno. He is a host of his own podcast show called the Knee Jerks Podcast with Big Al and Nick. And Greg's going to come on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 2024 Detroit Tigers and see if they can upset Houston. Good evening, Greg. How you doing?
I'm well, Chris. It's good to be with you as usual. Thanks for having me on.
Like we said before, it's a great time of the year for sports, and things are looking up in Detroit. This Tigers team, magical, historical kind of run they went on. The Lions are a Super Bowl contender. They seem to straighten things out. The Red Wings, optimistically, should make the playoffs this year, hopefully. And the only downer in Detroit right now is the Detroit Pistons, but we'll save the Pistons for another episode.
Another century.
Absolutely. But Greg, I wanted to get you on tonight and get your thoughts on this 2024 Detroit Tigers team.
Well, you told me before the show, you said, well, I shame on me. I didn't expect this. And I said, hey, you are not alone. No one was expecting this to unfold. The Tigers have been postseason participants for many, many, many different occasions. And this is easily the most unexpected of all those postseason appearances. If you go back through their history of all the times they played in October, those teams were expected to be good. There was no surprise, really. Even the 06 team, which kind of came out of nowhere, they played so well all year that by the time October came around, there was no doubt that they were going to be there. But this is something unusual. I just can't really. I wrote a piece on it last week. By the way, gregino.substack.com. I'll make a shameless plug for my Substack. But I wrote a piece last week about it. I say, if you're looking to try to categorize this, you can't do it. If you're looking for some sort of precedent or some sort of, another occasion where something like this happened, forget it. You can't. And it maybe the closest I could come, Chris, in terms of this happening in Major League Baseball would be the 2007 Rockies. It kind of came out of nowhere in August and September. I think they won like 16 in a row at one point or some ridiculous number like that. They finished like 22-2 or something, and then swept right through the NLDS, swept through the NLCS, and then got swept in the World Series. But other than that, I can't think of a story in baseball, Chris, that even comes close to this, much less just in Detroit. I mean, just in baseball in general, I don't think I can think of a story like this.
I would say my opinion would be the 87 Tigers because they were bad in April and May. They weren't bad the whole season, right. But I would say the 87 team because the Toronto Blue Jays back then were expected to win the division and actually get to the World Series. And to me, the 87 Tigers would be similar, but that team had veteran World Series champions on that team. This team has got a bunch of kids that, other than Matt Verling, who they got from the Phillies and played on their World Series team a couple years ago. But there's no veterans on this team. This is kids.
We were talking about that very same thing on the Knee Jerks last week about the kids. And I was a couple of weeks prior to that when they were starting to make their run. I said, the only thing they really don't have, I said, is that veteran guy or two you're referencing. I said, even the 84 Tigers that was filled with all those homegrown, all that homegrown talent they were in their prime, still had Darrell Evans, 36-year-old Darrell Evans, that they signed as a free agent to kind of be that guy, that Yoda, if you will, in the clubhouse. And that there was kind of like the missing ingredient. They came close in 83, couldn't quite, catch the Orioles. And then 84 went crazy. I'm not gonna credit it entirely to Darrell Evans, of course, but his presence on that team, and even 87, go back to your example. 87, Chris, if you remember, they picked up Bill Madlock. Early June, and everybody thought Mad Dog was done. He was awful with the Dodgers, hitting under 200 at the time. Tigers picked him up really for a song, and he ended up being one of those, same thing, veteran guy who'd been there before. He not only that, but he contributed mightily in terms of his offense. And who can ever forget that slide he took when he took out Tony Fernandez in Toronto the last week of the season, took Fernandez completely out of the mix for the rest of the year. Good, clean slide, a typical Bill Madlock play. That was another example of a veteran pickup that kind of was like a missing ingredient, X factor, if you will. But this team, Chris, it's funny. Normally I would say you need a guy like that. But as they kept winning, it became clear to me that they were too young to know any better. They were too young to know, hey, we're not supposed to be here. They were too young to know that, hey, this is supposed to be we're supposed to be overwhelmed by this experience. They were too young to know any of that stuff. They were just feeding off of each other's energy. A lot of these kids, I'm going to say the word kid, a lot of these kids weren't even on the roster or even in the organization at the All-Star break. They were acquired later. A lot of them were not on the opening day roster for sure. And here they are now. And I made the comparison that if instead of having that veteran player, they've got a veteran manager, AJ Hinch. He's been through the wars. He's won 1 million playoff games. He's managed 1 million playoff games. He's won a World Series. So he now functions as that guy just for the next couple of weeks here, or however long they're in the playoffs. Because like you said, Matt Vierling is their quote unquote elder statesman. And while Matt indeed was in the World Series 2 years ago, he's only 28. So they don't have that guy who's mid-30s, who's been through the wars. But the more they won, I don't think they missed a guy like that. I think they were just feeding off of each other's energy and just having a lot of fun.
I wanted to ask you this too, Greg. I know I'm not going to be popular in Detroit for saying this, but I know Al Avila as a general manager was a failure, but he did develop or draft some of these guys. Should he get a little bit of credit for some of these young players that he did draft?
Well, you slipped a little bit when you said develop. He didn't develop, and that's where that argument I think ends. Yeah, Al did draft some of these kids, no question about it. He drafted Torkelson, who's, of course, I know he's been up and down. He drafted Skubal. There's some other people that he did draft. That's true. And yeah, I mean, you can't take that away from him for sure. And frankly, when Al was let go, those kids a lot of them were too young to be in the big leagues anyway. So it's on the other hand, it is unfair to say, well, he didn't develop them or he didn't oversee their development because they weren't old enough to play in the big leagues at that time anyway. But yeah, I mean, right now, I don't think to me, it's not about looking backward, who gets credit for what, who gets blamed for what. Just enjoy the ride. This should be the start of something. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if I would give Scott Harris, that's going to sound crazy, a lot of credit yet either. We have to see what comes of this team going forward. Was this, I'm not going to say flash in the pan because that's too harsh, but is this a one-off and we're going to see a return to below 500 next year? Or is this indeed the beginning now of a core of players that will indeed be a force to be reckoned with in the second half of this decade? We'll see.
What's your gut feeling? I tend to think this can be long-term success. My
Yeah.
only concern is we brought this up before. Their payroll's only at $98 million. I think it's in the top five at the bottom. Is Chris Illich willing to spend and add what they need to go forward in the future, no matter what happens this year?
Well, first of all, gone, as you know, gone are the days of 10-year Bryce Harper type contracts that were signed back in the mid 2010s. Those kind of contracts aren't handed out anymore. They're just not. You might get a guy in a 3 to 5 year term and even then you might have an opt out after 2. That's the new thing now, as you know, opting out of contracts. So, those days are gone. So the big spend isn't necessarily going to be in terms of length. It's going to be in terms of AAV, or they call annual value. That's what's going to determine how far he wants to shove his chips into the middle of the table. I don't have a good feel for that right now. I think that, again, that'll sort itself out after the season. Right now, there's a series to be played, 2 or 3 game series here against the Astros. We'll see after that. But I think what this does do, even if we weren't expecting this, Chris, is it does accelerate, without question, this whole thing. I mean, Scott Harris has been here 2 days in a week, 2 years in a week. He was hired in September of 2022. He says that he's not surprised by this. I think he's kind of fibbing a little bit. I don't think even he saw this coming. Certainly not at the trade deadline when they dealt Jack Flaherty and a couple other pieces. And that's okay. I'm not going to belittle anybody for not expecting this, but it has happened. So now it's time to look at the roster. And I'm with you. I tend to agree with you that I think this is sustainable. I think there are some pieces, but I think people have to be realistic in that. There's even the Trey Sweeneys of the world and young kids like that. We don't know yet, Chris. We really don't. It's too small of a sample size. We don't know if these players are really part of the future or not. I mean, we'd like to think they are, but I think it's unrealistic to look at the roster now and say every single one of these guys that are under 25 years old, and there are a lot of them, are going to be a part of the big leagues and be a contributing factor to the next winning Tigers team. I think that's going too far because that's unrealistic, but I think there are enough pieces there. Riley Green, of course, Parker Meadows. I think Justin Henry Malloy will be a keeper. But the Zach McKinstry's of the world, the Sweeneys,
Colt Keith.
Keith, I think is going to be okay. But even Torkelson, I'm not sure about. There's still Jake Rogers. I don't know. I hope so, but we really don't know.
And you know what the scary part is? If Torkelson lived up to expectations and could hit like 260, 270, 30 home runs, 80 RBIs, how good would this team have been? They might have been able to contend with Cleveland for the AL Central if Torkelson lived up to his expectations.
Well, there's that, and there's Kenta Maeda, who was a bust, of course, as a starting pitcher that Harris signed. Canna was dealt, but he was on the downswing when he was traded. I mean, look at Javi Baez, who once again didn't put it together, and there's now all sorts of questions about his future with the team, especially considering that his departure almost directly coincided with this hot streak. Was that a coincidence? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think so entirely. I think that there was something that I think his presence on the roster and in the lineup had a lot to do with why they were 8 games below 500. But so it's Torkelson for sure, but it's not just Torkelson. I mean, there's some other players that didn't quite pan out, but we have to talk about, and I'm sure it's going to on your list of questions. We got to talk about AJ Hinch and the job he's done with that pitching staff.
I was going to get to that right now, Greg. In terms of AJ Hinch, we know how great of a manager he is with Houston, and regardless of what happened there. But would you, in your opinion, Greg, and you've seen a lot of baseball over the decades, would you say this might be AJ Hinch's best managing job this year in 2024 with his team?
Well, his first year with Houston was pretty good because that he took over a team, as you know, that was really bad. Those early 2010 Astros teams were really, really bad. And he kind of, so much of managing, Chris, is being at the right place at the right time. Sparky Anderson came to Detroit in 1979, right when that core of kids was all gelling. We're all gelling together. Trammell, Whitaker, Gibson, Parrish, Morris,
Of course.
all gelling. Then Jim Campbell and Bill LaJoy add some pieces. And now everybody's in their prime at the right time. You get a couple of veteran pieces added to the mix. Sparky's been through the wars. He's been there, done that. And that's why that team won. Hinch joined the Astros right when, Altuve et al. Were hitting their stride and they were young and kind of unproven at the time, but they were dynamic young players. And Hinch wasn't at Houston when in the Bo, I can't remember his last name, Bo, his name escapes me, the manager before Hinch. He wasn't there in those years. He came there right when Altuve and company started to come onto the scene. And of course they were very good. But yeah, I mean, if you're just going to go by, this was an unexpected. Hinch never had to do what he's doing this year, which is basically have two starting pitchers, Tariq Skubal and Montero, and go with 3 bullpen days, which is essentially what he's doing. Maeda let him down. I guess you could throw Reese Olson in there as a starter, but he doesn't go very deep into games. Hinch has had to, and he's had the benefit, of course, with expanded rosters in September. He's had to pitch a lot of different people at a lot of different times. You can't do that as much in the postseason because your roster size is limited down to 26. But the job he's done, kind of massaging that pitching staff with guys not really knowing when they come to the ballpark that day whether they're pitching, and beyond that, when they're going to pitch. They don't know if they're going to be in the 6th inning to put out a fire, if they're going to be in the 8th inning to be the setup guy, or if they're to close a game. AJ he's known for changing pitchers in the 9th inning. He doesn't have a dedicated closer. He'll start the 9th with one guy, finish it with another guy. That's unheard of nowadays in baseball. How dare you do that? He does that regularly. And so these guys really don't know when they're going to be coming into the game. They've always got to be ready. But you know what? I think they like that. I think they kind of like not knowing when their number is going to be called. And usually when their number is called, it's in a high leverage situation because, anybody who's followed baseball knows you can have a high leverage situation in the 6th inning as much, if not more, than you have in the 9th.
We talk about AJ Hinch, but what's your thoughts on the pitching coach, Chris Fetter, and the job that he's done with these young pitchers? And
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you said that because we were mentioning that as well on the knee jerks, was that you look at Fetter and you look at these pitchers and what they're doing right now. You just look at their ERAs. I know ERA is kind of an antiquated stat, but you want to look at any metric. You want to look at BABIP. You want to look at WHIP. You want to look at whatever you want to look at. These pitchers have numbers with Fetter as their coach that they didn't have before.
Or in AAA.
That happens a couple of times, or maybe it's a coincidence or whatever. It's not a couple of times. It's happening a lot. And even their numbers, Chris, in the big leagues are better than in AAA in some instances.
Go figure.
Right. So I think that the Fetter factor is real for sure. I mean, there throughout history, there's always coaches that kind of get a lot of credit, whether it's Charlie Lau as a hitting coach or Walt Riniak as a hitting coach or Leo Mazzoni as a pitching coach, or going back, I'm old enough to remember George Bamberger as a pitching coach back in the day with the Orioles. But I think sometimes that praise is earned and deserved. And is Chris Fetter one of the best pitching coaches of baseball? Yeah, I think so. I think the numbers prove it. I think what he's done, and I mentioned Hinch being the mastermind, but don't forget what Chris Fetter does. Do not go to sleep on Fetter. He's been invaluable. And he was one of the first hires, if not, Chris, the first hire that AJ Hinch made after he became manager in 2020 was hire this unknown guy from Michigan. Nobody knew him outside of college baseball. Who's Chris Fetter? Why is he hiring some college pitching coach? Well, Fetter's gone out there and been nothing but amazing in his 4 seasons.
And with the Tigers having success, and we don't know what it's going to be like in the postseason, you're going to see other teams wanting some of their coaches seeing the Detroit success. And this pitching staff has just been unbelievable, and they've been winning a lot of games with pitching and their defense. I wanted to mention this to you too, Greg. Their defense since the end of July, beginning of August has been really good too. And it's just pitching, defense, and they have been getting some timely hitting too.
Well, AJ said it, I think last week. He said, and I don't know where he's getting his numbers, but I'm not gonna argue with him. He said we're the best team that goes from first to third, certainly since the All-Star break. And I believe him. I mean, they do. The Tigers go from first to third as good as anyone. They've got their base running has improved along with their defense. Their base running wasn't always all that great either in AJ's time, but they've got some smart. They've been running the bases smartly. They've put it all together. I mean, you don't go 31-11 just on one thing. You don't go 31-11 just in hitting. You don't go 31-11 just on pitching. You have to have. It's like football. Offense, defense, special teams. You have to have everything humming and hitting. Hitting on all cylinders, and that's what they're doing on all facets of the game. Defense, base running, pitching, starting pitching, relieving. Offense has been okay, good enough, not great, but even they're showing some improvement there. Riley Green, I think, is going to be a star. I really do. I think Parker Meadows has the chance to be a star in this league. These are good, dynamic young players. And Riley was, I think, drafted 3rd overall in 2019, and he's proving that was a good pick. But what I want to see though now, Chris, after this dust settles and after the season's over with and everything, I want to see now some roster construction. I want to see some complementary pieces added. I want to see how Scott Harris navigates. This is going to be a difficult, well, I shouldn't say difficult, an interesting offseason for him, I think. I'll also be interested, Chris, to see, I know I'm going way ahead of myself here, but I'm eager to see where they're going to be picked next year. I think the Tigers could be picked anywhere from 1st to 4th in that division. That Central Division, all of a sudden now, has 3 teams in the playoffs: the Tigers, Royals, and the Guardians. Sorry, the Guardians. Who would have thought that was possible? That was always regarded as maybe the weakest division in baseball, certainly in the American League. But now it's without question the West is the weakest. But I mean, I don't know where the prognosticate. I'm sure the Tigers will be a trendy pick for a lot of people. Are going to pick them first. That's going to go. They're going to, even if they get swept by the Astros this week, they're going to be picked first by some preseason publications. They're going to jump on the Tigers bandwagon and say they're the up and coming young team and they're going to finish first and everything. I think put the brakes on that a little bit. I think it's a little bit too early, but where they're going to be picked next year, I think is going to be interesting because I think it's going to be all over the board.
Detroit seems to do better as a city of underdogs. And the 04 Pistons really came out of nowhere to win the championship too. But that team had a lot of veteran players or throwaway players that gelled together. This team is really, like I said, they're just having fun. That's what I like about this team. They're fun to watch and they're enjoyable. And it doesn't seem to be any egos and it's next man up. Everybody contributes. But I wanted to ask you this, Greg. I know the last 2 games against the White Sox weren't that important, but dropping from the 5th seed to the 6th seed, do you feel, Greg, they would have been a better matchup with the Orioles than the Houston Astros, who have won 2 World Series the last 7 years and 7 straight trips to the ALCS?
That's a good question because your initial response might be to say, yeah, it's a better matchup with the Orioles because they handled the Orioles toward the end of the year. They took 4 out of 6.
6, yes.
At the end of the year. But, I'm a believer, Chris, that when you are on a streak like the Astros are on, you mentioned the 7 straight ALCS appearances, you're due to have that streak end. I mean, that is a long streak.
Good point.
And I know, and don't forget, they've got a rookie manager. I'm not taking anything away from their manager, but he's a rookie. In terms of he's never managed in the big leagues before. He's 49 years old. He's taking over, of course, for Dusty Baker. I know their players are veteran. That's true. But their manager has not been here before. Now, and A.J. Hinch has. Well, you know as well as I know, there have been a lot of really good teams who've lost in the postseason, and their fan bases have rightly pointed directly at the manager as the reason why they've lost. I mean, immediately. And it doesn't even have to be a rookie manager either. It can be anyone. I remember when Buck Showalter took a lot of grief. I don't know how many years ago it was now. In one of I'm not even sure if it was the DS series or the CS series. Buck took a lot of grief over the way he handled his bull. I think he was managing the Orioles at the time. I think I'd have to fact check this, but Buck's been a manager forever, and he took a lot of heat for essentially a lot of his fans and a lot of people who weren't even fans of that team thought he lost that series based on his decision making. So I believe that when you've been to the ALCS 7 years in a row, you're kind of you're not playing with house money like the Tigers are. You're playing with fire, and you're kind of tempting fate. That streak's got to end one way or the other. I'm not saying it's going to end this year, but now you're asking a team to make it to the ALCS 8 times in a row. Now I know that if they win, the Astros win this series, they're not in the ALCS yet. But to get to the ALCS, they've got to win this series. I don't know. I then they got the Hinch factor coming back to Houston.
Verlander, Detroit connections, Jake Rogers. I
almost would be nervous about the Orioles because the Tigers beat them 4 out of 6. Because sometimes that can work against you. You feel, oh, we got their number. I just as soon not face them. I just as soon go in against nobody thinks they could beat a lot of people would think they could beat the Orioles. Nobody thinks they can beat the Astros. So I think this is okay.
I think they have an edge in managing, and I think their pitching and their bullpen is pretty good. Just if they can score enough runs, I think game 1, Greg, is going to be critical with Scudro and down. I wanted to ask you this. Tarek Scudro, only the 3rd Tiger pitcher to ever win the Triple Crown, Cy Young, Verlander, and Hal Newhouser. In terms of all the great Tiger left-handed pitchers in the history of this team, and you've seen, Greg, what's your thoughts on Tarek Scudro and his season this year?
Skubal is probably, here's the thing about Skubal. I know it's funny because he's a lefty that wears number 29, just like Mickey Lolich was a lefty. He wore number 29. And Mickey struck out a lot of hitters, and Skubal strikes out a lot of hitters, and so on and so forth. But they're different pitchers. I know that. I understand they're pitching in different eras. I get it. But Skubal is the thing I like about him is he's got an edge about him. All these great pitchers. You mentioned Verlander a few minutes ago. All these great pitchers throughout history. Koufax, Drysdale, Bob Gibson, on and on and on. Clemens, on and on and on. They all had an edge about them. There was something about them that when they took the mound, they had a presence. There's a presence about these guys. There's a reason why they're as good as they are. There's a reason why they're a little bit better than everybody else. And one of those reasons is they've got a mound presence. And Skubal has that. He's not one of these guys I think that has kind of lucked into a good year and like he's peaking and we'll never hear from him again. I think this is just the beginning of what he can be. I'm not going to put him in the same category as a Verlander or any of these other guys I just mentioned, but for the Tigers, for what they need him to be, he'll, if everything goes well and they re-sign this guy and keep him in Detroit, he'll be the ace of the staff for the next 10 years. He should, unless, if he stays healthy, obviously. But he's got a presence about him, Chris, that I think differentiates him. And all the great pitchers have it. They just do. You rarely see a great pitcher who's kind of, passive on the mound and doesn't really have a lot of personality. They all have it, and he's got it. And I think that we're going to see now. And even if he gets lit up in Houston tomorrow, which I hope it doesn't happen, of course, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be because the moment was too big for him. I think it's just going to be because he's going up against a really good team. But I don't think it's going to be too big for him. I think he's ready for this, and I think he's going to respond.
You might not agree with me on this, Greg, but maybe being at home, Detroit with those fans might put too much pressure on them. So it might be a good thing for them to start the series on the road. I don't know if you agree with me on that or not.
You know what? Hey, when you've won 31 out of 11, 31, when you've gone 31 and 11, when you've gone 31 and 11, obviously you've won everywhere. And the Tigers finished with a winning record on the road, by the way. I think they're like 43 and 38 or 40. They won 43 to 45 games on the road. Okay. So they were above 500 on the road this year, which is not easy to do, especially for a club that's that young. Okay. So they did that. In fact, if anything, they were having trouble playing at home earlier in the year. They had a better record on the road than they had at home all year long, really. So I think there's some, there's some merit to what you're saying, but they would be underdogs against the Astros, even if they played in Detroit, which sounds crazy. But yeah, playing in Houston, nobody's expecting really anything of them. And I think that's okay because like I said in my piece today, I came out with a new piece on gregino.substack.com. that they are, to me, still playing with house money. They didn't cash in all that house money when they won the division, or not when they won the wild card spot. They still have more house money left to play with, and I think they'll play with it, and they still have that currency.
Thoughts on Jackson Joby? Do you feel he'll be in this series as well at some
I don't
point?
know about that. First of all, the series is only going to be 3 games tops, maybe 2, probably 2, but maybe 3. And I don't know how many opportunities he'll have to get in. When they called him up last week, everybody kind of raised their eyebrows. And I said, well, that is interesting. I don't think they called him up to not pitch. And then I thought, well, but when will he pitch? Will he pitch in a blowout? Will he pitch in a high leverage situation? It really was neither. Hinch put him in kind of not in a high leverage situation, but also not a blowout necessarily. I think he came in at one point in the 9th inning when they had like a 4-run lead or something. That's okay. That's all right. And he got it. He finished the game on the mound. But these games in Houston, I don't know. I mean, if he does put him in, the factor that he would have, of course, is nobody's really seen him pitch. There's not a lot of scouting reports on him. I don't know how much info the Astros have on him from his days in the minor leagues, AA and AAA. He wasn't in AAA very long, mostly in AA. I know that scouting reports now are so intensive, especially in this day and age of computers and everything. I'm sure they've got something on him, but he's still kind of an unknown. And it would be kind of gutsy to put him in a situation where it is high leverage. I don't know. I lean toward no, only because they've done so well, Chris, without him. They didn't get to this point with Jackson Jobe as being a contributing factor. He's an X factor right now, and I don't see that happening.
My heart says the Tigers win this in 3 games,
Okay.
but my head says the Astros in 3. I think regardless, I think it's going to be 3 games, and I think it's going to be very close ball games. And Greg, this brings me up, besides who we just brought up, Jackson Joby, who else on this Tigers roster could be an X factor in this series against the Astros?
Oh, let me think about that for a second. Well, I'm gonna exclude people on the mound because that's so unpredictable, because you don't know when people are going to come in. You don't know who's going to pitch. They got so many options. I'm going to stick to position players. I don't know if you consider him an X factor because he's been such a contributor, but I'm going to go with Parker Meadows. I think back to that grand slam Chris he hit in San Diego with bases loaded, 9th inning. Tigers were down, I think 3-0 at the time. They weren't doing anything all day. He's going up against one of the best closers in the National League. The count goes to 3-2. The crowd's going crazy. They're standing, ready to cheer a game-ending strikeout. And Meadows hits an opposite, I think, left center field bomb, grand slam that just completely quieted the crowd. Tigers won that game. That was kind of toward the beginning of this streak. And I just think, Chris, the reason I say he's an X factor because he can do so many things. He's got those long loping strides out in center field. He runs like a gazelle. He can run things down. I say he's an X factor because I think he could save a game with his glove as well as with his bat and even with his arm. So there's multiple ways that he can be a contributing factor. And I wouldn't I hate to call him an X factor because that insinuates that he's some dark horse guy that's kind of in the background. But I just think he's an X factor because he can do things, so many different things. You don't know how he's going to beat you.
I tend to agree with you there, Greg. I'm going to go with someone else, and I'm going to go with Colt Keith. Okay. I really like him, and I think he's starting to develop nicely. So I think he might be a big factor in this game as well. But winning game 1 is going to be huge. Obviously, being a best of 3, you want to get that first game. And Scudro, I feel can even go the whole distance. Do you feel they will let him pitch the whole 9 innings, a complete game, if he had that opportunity?
No.
Or do you feel no?
Okay. Scubel only pitched into the 8th inning once all year. Okay, that's number 1.
Wow.
Number 2, he would have, unless he was at like some ridiculously low number. If he was like at 90 pitches after 8 innings, AJ and depending what the score was. I mean, maybe, but no, he's got too many weapons. AJ has in that bullpen to stretch out Scubel long. This isn't Justin Verlander throwing 130 pitches anymore. If he's going to get to like 85 pitches, 90 pitches, and if that's the 6th inning, he's out. If that's the 7th inning, he's out. Why? Because AJ's got a bunch of guys in the bullpen who can get the job. Why? Well, I mean, I know he's your ace, but why stretch him out like that? And quite frankly, if you win this series, why pitch him 95 to 100 pitches if you don't have to? Why not take him out after 80 or 90? turn the game over to the bullpen. And I think AJ could live with that. I know that he might get some criticism from the fans if he took Skubal out while Skubal was pitching a gem, but he's got a lot of weapons in that bullpen. That's what got them here. The bullpen is largely what got them to this point. So why would he at this juncture do an about face and ride Skubal like he's JV 2014?
Totally agree with you there, Greg. And before we wrap this up, the Tigers, I saw in their stats for this series against Chicago, they had 128,108 fans at Comerica Park for their biggest 3-game series attendance since 2012. And this stretch of baseball they just played was their best since 2011, which was hard to believe. I was going back to 1984, but I guess the 2011 team was pretty terrific as well. But Detroit it's not just a football town, it's a sports town.
Of course. And, this is the first playoff appearance by the Tigers in 10 years and the first time they've been relevant in about 8 years. And it all happened so quickly. I don't know the fans have really had a chance to really process this yet. The fact that they're playing these games in Houston, of course, robs them of a chance to see some home playoff games. And frankly, Chris, I'm a little bit disappointed for the fans that these games are all going to be played at 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if necessary. It's a shame because everybody's, the people who are working during the day, the kids are in school, and a lot of people just won't be able to, they'll have to sneak watch the game or, I don't know how they're going to watch it, frankly. They could take the days off, I guess, but it's too bad that the first playoff appearance in 10 years are going to be played in the middle of the afternoon during the week. But I think Major League Baseball doesn't want the playoff games to compete with each other. And I understand that, I guess. I don't know why the Tigers drew the early games, maybe because they're, the least likely to advance. I don't know. But I feel bad for the fans that are going to really be challenged to watch these games live.
Does the TV networks have a say in the start times of the 100% Major League Baseball?
I don't know. I don't think they have. I don't think the networks have a say in start times. I don't think so. I think that's all MLB. I can't imagine that TV would be able to overrule MLB in terms of what time the games start. I don't know why they can't start maybe an hour later, maybe 3:30 Eastern time, but that's still not going to give people, they can at least catch the end of the game when they get home. I know I'm going to have to go to the office tomorrow. I'm not sure how I'm going to watch the game. I might have to sneak watch it on my phone or just constantly refresh my Google scoring thing. It's too bad because a lot of people are amped up for this, and it kind of puts a little bit of a damper on it.
Can I get your prediction, Greg, in this 3-game series, Tigers or Astros?
Yeah, I'm predicting Astros in 3. I'm okay with your prediction, though. That wouldn't surprise me because anything can happen in 3 games, but I'm going to go with the Astros in 3. And there's no shame. The Tigers should not hold their head. Even if they lose in 2, no shame, because no one expected them to be here. I know they don't want to hear that because once you're there, you want to go further. But it was a great year no matter what. That's why I keep saying it's house money. Just play loosey-goosey. If you luck out and grab a game here in game 1 or 2 and force a game 3, all the pressure's on Houston at that point.
Absolutely. And it's also playoff experience for a lot of these young guys and going forward. So you're right. I'm going to go with the Tigers in 3, but I won't be shocked if Houston wins in 3. Right. But it would be nice if Detroit could get by Houston and take on their Ohio rivals, the Guardians. But I'm really looking forward to it. Greg, and before we wrap this up, because I know you've got Lions football in Seattle tonight at 8:15 at Ford Field, where can my audience follow you on social media, your website, and when is your next Knee Jerks podcast show with Nick and Big Al?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to do that. Follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at Greg Eno. And please subscribe to my Substack. It's free right now, gregeno.substack.com. I pretty much, if you do subscribe, I'll be in your inbox every Monday, sometimes twice a week, but certainly every Monday with the new piece, late in the afternoon, early evening, every Monday. And the Knee Jerks, we record every other Monday. This is a Monday where we're not recording. That's why I'm able to be with you here tonight. So we'll be back at it next Monday, the 7th. Sometimes we have to wait a couple of days because our schedules, but generally we record every other week. And we are now, Chris, in year 16, believe it or not.
Congratulations. I'm just entering year 5, so that's amazing. You're one of the pioneers of podcasting.
We like to think so. I mean, back when we started in 2009, there weren't nearly as many of us, back then as there are now. And that's great. I love to see podcasts grow and develop. I love to see more and more people do them. I'm always a big champion of it. But yeah, we were kind of on there early. I don't know if we set a trend, because I'm not going to go that far, but we were ahead of a lot of our brethren in that regard for sure.
And my show for the last year and a half has been on a radio station in Georgia as well. So this technology has been great. Hey, before I let you go, Greg, just quickly, there's 2 Monday night football games: Seattle, Detroit, 8:15, Tennessee, Miami at 7:30. Just quick picks for tonight's Monday night games.
Well, Tennessee's awful. I think they're awful. I think that Miami will handle them. Detroit, Chris, has had an awful time with the Seahawks. I mean, just awful. Going back to the Calvin Johnson days, that weird play in the end zone, that was also on national TV, by the way. Playoff game they lost up there. The last 2 seasons, the Seahawks have come to Detroit and won. And here they are again, third year in a row in Detroit, which is kind of a scheduling quirk. The Lions have had just an awful time with this club. And so I don't have a lot of good feelings about this one, frankly. Lions are banged up. I think that I'm going to go with the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are going to win. I hope not, but I just go by the way the Lions, just for whatever reason, Chris, have not played well against the Seahawks, or have just not been able to play well enough to win. It's been crazy. They have a crazy history with that franchise. I can't even remember. I literally can't remember the last time the Lions beat the Seahawks. I know they don't play them all that often, but in the history of the Lions-Seahawks matchups since Seattle's been in the league, the Lions have won precious few. I
can relate the Philadelphia Eagles when they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whether it's in Tampa or in Philadelphia, they don't match up well with them at all. And right now, you should listen to Philly Talk Radio. They're ready to fire Sirianni and gut the whole team. And they have a bye week this week. And you know what? The NFC is open up for grabs right now. The Niners are 2-2. The Eagles are 2-2. Dallas is 2-2. There's nobody really dominating right now. So
the Vikings are 4-0.
That's true. 4-0, but I'm still not sold on Sam Darnold and the Vikings at some point. I think it's going to catch up to them. But then again, the Vikings could be the NFL versions of the Detroit Tigers.
Well, they jumped out to a 21-0 lead over Green Bay yesterday. Had to hold on. They won, but I think they won like 31-29 or something like that.
Yes.
So, I mean, that was a close one that didn't have to be close. I'm with you on the Darnold thing. Fair or not, I feel the same way about him as you do. I'm not sold on the Vikings either. But having said that, the Lions have a chance to stay within 1 game of the Vikings. You don't want to fall behind too far.
No.
I know it's only 4 games in, but who wants to be 2-2 and the other team's 4-0? You'd rather be 3-1. But the Seahawks, they're just such a tough matchup. And I don't, even in years, Chris, where the Seahawks weren't great, they've handled the Lions, and I it's weird. It's just, and you mentioned the Buccaneers and the Eagles. Who could forget the Bucs going into, I think it was the last game at Veterans Stadium?
Yeah, and they destroyed us.
And that was a situation where the Eagles thought they were going to the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah.
And Tampa couldn't win in cold weather and blah, blah, blah. And was that the year the Bucs won the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I believe it was. Yes.
Yeah. With Gruden?
John Gruden, yeah. So just certain teams in sports don't match up. And it's just, So, but Greg, I'm going to let you go because, like I said, you got Lions Seahawks at 8:15. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on my 437th episode tonight. You have an open invite to come back on again. Hopefully when we talk next, we can talk about this Pistons team that's actually improving, and maybe they'll actually shock us and be at least 500 this year. I hope.
Well, Chris, it's always fun to talk to you. Thank you for asking me to be here, and I always have a good time when I'm here. And thanks again.
And Detroit's like my second home, and I have cousins in Taylor, Michigan, and I'm hoping to be up in Michigan at some point again as well.
Great.
Thanks so much, Greg. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, my friend. Be well. Okay.
You too.
Talk to you later.
All right, guys, that was season 8, episode 52, overall 437 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by BarryCullen.com here in Guelph. Before we wrap up the show, guys, about a week and a half ago, I was down at Salem Field, the home of the Buffalo Bisons, the top farm team of the Toronto Blue Jays, and Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders were in town, the top farm team of the New York Yankees, and a former Buffalo Bison Toronto Blue Jays prospect is on that team now. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Cam Eden, and this is courtesy of my YouTube channel. And make sure you hit that subscribe and like notification to my YouTube channel. Chris Pame, radio host of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show on WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia. I'm here again in downtown Buffalo for tonight's Friday night matchup between the Scranton and Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders taking on the Buffalo Bisons. And I have a special guest with me today, former Buffalo Bisons outfielder Cam Eden. And I'm going to talk to Cam about leaving the Bisons and coming to the Rail Riders and the second half of the season. Hey, Cam, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Chris?
Good. I was going to say, welcome back to Buffalo, and thoughts on your time with the Buffalo Bisons organization and the Toronto Blue Jays organization.
Oh, it was definitely phenomenal for me. The Blue Jays themselves were great for me. They always have my back, and they did a lot for me in my growth as a player and as a person. So, and then as well as here as in Buffalo the last couple of years, the organization here has been great from top to down, top to bottom. So it's a huge impact on my life the last couple of years, and I couldn't be more grateful.
How much of an adjustment was it coming to the Rail Riders, and who were some guys that kind of made you feel like at home right away from the team?
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment. You know, I've never changed organizations before, and I've been with the Blue Jays for the first 5 years of my career. So it was definitely a big adjustment, but all the guys here, staff, players are really great, and I'd say Jemai Jones is one of the guys who kind of made me feel at home right away, and Trammell and Greg Allen. So there are some guys that definitely welcomed me in and made me feel, take some of that anxiety away, change the teams and whatnot.
What are your thoughts on Shelley Duncan and the former Major League ball player and the Rail Riders coaching staff?
Yeah, Shelley's great. He supports me, has my back too. He's really good for me. He wants me to succeed and doesn't want me to. He's okay with me failing, so that kind of gives me the freedom to let my abilities take over and not worry about making any wrong mistakes and whatnot. So that was a good adjustment for coming over here, and then the staff itself is great. Like there's a whole lot of development already going on since I've been here, hitting, base running, and defensive wise. So I feel like I've already become a better player from just being over here for a couple weeks. So it's been great.
How much was it of an adjustment coming from Salem Field to the ballpark at Scranton Wilkes-Barre?
Yeah, I've played there before, so I'm pretty familiar with the stadium. It is an adjustment. I'd say, like, fan-wise, it's definitely get more here in Buffalo. But in the stadium, the setup's a little bit different. But I feel like the last couple of years I've played at Scranton enough to feel comfortable there already. As my home field. So not a terribly big adjustment there.
What are your thoughts on this Rail Riders team that really came on strong in the second half and just fell short of a playoff spot this year?
Yeah, it was a great team here. A lot of really, really good players from the pitching side to the position player side. So there's a lot of good players here and a lot of big league players, big league caliber players. So just being around these guys already makes me better. And I've learned a lot from just playing with the team and being around some of these players. So it's a really exciting group to be with.
Cam, being the second year of AAA for you, what's the biggest difference between your game now than it was even a year ago?
I would say I'm just maybe a little bit. I think just experience overall, kind of changes you. So I think defensive wise, I've kind of cleaned up some things. But it's still baseball. It's still hard. There's me up years or down years and whatnot. So. It's a really hard game, and this year wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, but now is not the time I can really do much about it now other than prepare for next year.
Just quick thoughts on manager Casey Candell and the development he has done with a lot of guys going up to the Toronto Blue Jays this year.
Yeah. I mean, Casey's a huge, probably one of the biggest instruments in that. And the younger guys going up to Toronto and making a difference, as soon as they get there. And he's a really good manager. I've had him for 3 years in my career, and he just teaches a lot about the game. I've learned so much about the game from him, just being around him for a couple of years. And he definitely prepares you for what it's going to be like in the big leagues. And I think he has a big impact on those younger players, making it up there and doing well.
And what's your thoughts on Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and the area around where the ballpark is?
Yeah, it's a pretty beautiful area, like naturally beautiful. I wasn't there. I'm only there for about 2 homestands, so I wasn't there to explore as much as I wanted to. But I made my way around a little bit and saw some of the beautiful nature spots there. So it was really fun to be there for a couple weeks, and hopefully next year I can get a little more chance to explore it.
And you were number 2 with the Bisons. Is there a story behind number 25 with the Rail Riders?
No, not a story there. I actually just came to the when I got traded, I went to the locker room and they kind of had 25 picked out for me already. So no story there, but I'm not complaining. It's a pretty good number too. It has number 2 in it as well, so not bad.
If you have a choice between a Canadian chocolate bar, O. Henry or Coffee Crisp, which one would you choose?
O. Henry or Coffee Crisp? I think I'd go with Coffee Crisp. I like coffee, so and coffee flavored things. So I think I'd go with that.
And what's one fun fact about Cam Eden, and what do you miss most about Buffalo?
Ooh, fun fact. I'd say a fun fact maybe is that I'm a big basketball fan. I like basketball a lot, and I miss about Buffalo. I definitely just miss the city in general. Just like I've had a lot of good memories here over the last couple of years, and it just kind of feels at home to me. So having that sense of being back here for right now is actually pretty cool to finish the season here. We know where I started a couple of years ago. So there's a lot I miss about the city, and I love the city a lot for sure.
And finally, Cam, where can people follow you on social media? Best place to follow you on social media?
Yeah, it would probably be Instagram, which my handle would be Cameron_Eden.
Hey, Cam, I want to say thank you so much for giving us some time here today, and continued success this weekend against Buffalo and going into the 2025 season.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks, Cam. This is Cam Eden of the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders, top farm team of the New York Yankees. All right, guys, that was Cam Eden from the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders, former Buffalo Bison, former Toronto Blue Jay prospect as well. And it was a pleasure interviewing him down at Salem Field. Speaking of baseball, Major League Baseball playoffs start tomorrow. Detroit, Houston, game 1, 2:32 at Houston. Kansas City, Baltimore, game 1. Then to be announced at Milwaukee, to be announced at San Diego. We know for the National League, Milwaukee, San Diego have home field advantage in the first round of the wild card. The Mets are in now, and we're waiting for one more other team to get in the playoffs in the National League. The Phillies and Dodgers have the bye in the National League. Cleveland and the Yankees have a bye in the American League playoffs. So this is a great time of the year, and looking forward to the underdog Tigers against the Astros. The Astros are obviously favored to win this series. I'm going to go with Detroit in 3 games, and I really think Colt Keith is going to be an X factor for the Tigers, and I think Scudro is going to have an outstanding game tomorrow. I really think the Tigers have nothing to lose. The Astros have everything to lose, so I'm going to go with the Tigers in 3 games. Kansas City, Baltimore, I'm going to go with the Royals over the Orioles in 3 games. And as for the National League Series, too early yet. We don't know exactly the matchups, so we'll see what happens there as well. Guys, just to let you know, before we wrap up, the next Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored again by BarryCullin.com and weeknights at 8 p.m. on WQE 99.1 FM. It's going to be Thursday, October 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern with my special guest, Courtney Nicole from the Underground New England as their social media coordinator and in marketing as well. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Courtney Nicole about her role with the Underground in New England. And it should be a very interesting show. And I hope you guys can tune in this Thursday, October 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 on the West Coast. Today is Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, if I pronounce that right. The day honors the children who never returned home and the survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. Public commemoration of this tragic and painful history and the ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of reconciliation process. So September 30th, and hopefully everybody wore orange today, and I do have an orange hat on tonight too as well. So I just wanted to mention this before we wrap up tonight's show as well. If you're looking to adopt, check out the Cambridge District Humane Society, 1650 Dunbar Road in Cambridge, Ontario. Telephone number 519-623-7722, or visit their website at cambridgehumanesociety.org. All the animals up for adoption, their profiles are on the website. And if you're looking to volunteer like myself, you can fill out a volunteer application through their website. And they are doing a 50-50 raffle, a monthly raffle, and you can get tickets at cambridgehumanesociety.org. And they do have 2025 calendars for $10 coming out, I believe, in October or November. And I'm going to hopefully help sell some calendars as well. And the money from the calendars will go to all the programs at the Cambridge District Humane Society. And please check out their website again, cambridgehumanesociety.org. They do really good work down there with our forever furry friends. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show is hosted by yours truly. Chris Pame is on weeknights from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern on WQEE 99.1 FM, The Key, the home of Southern sports and talk, the heartbeat of Atlanta. Our radio station's website is wqeefm.radio12345.com. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show is live streamed on these platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter /X, Twitch, LinkedIn, and now available on Instagram. And also, guys, I am now on Good Pods. So if you want to listen to my show, check out Good Pods and subscribe to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. Also, guys, you can subscribe and follow my website at beacons.ai/Chris D. Pame. All my social media sites, all my digital writing and media work is on beacons.ai/Chris D. Pame. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show again is sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210, or email them at info@barrycullen.com. Speaking of Barry Cullen Chevrolet, check out a 2024 Equinox EV 2RS starting from $52,611, includes $5,000 in government rebates. Eligible Costco members can receive up to $1,200 bonus on select EV vehicles. More details at barrycullen.com. Live with CDP Sports merchandise is coming soon. You can also follow this content creator on TikTok at Live with CDP. StreamYard is the official live stream provider of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. If you're into webinars or podcasting, check out StreamYard.com. I've been with them for 4 years, and I give them a big thumbs up. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, the audio version is available on these platforms: iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Castbox, LinkedIn, Pandora, TuneIn, YouTube Music, and now available on Good Pods. Make sure you hit that subscribe notification. And also, thank you to everyone for following me on YouTube. I'm now up to 455 subscribers. 1,907 videos. I do post a lot of content there, including short videos too. And I want to say thank you to my 228,578 views on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching Live with CDP Sports Entertainment Talk Show on my YouTube channel. Finally, guys, you can email or text the show at Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show at cpame19@gmail.com or text the show at 519-820-7188. Any comments, questions, suggestions, feedback would be greatly appreciated. And before we wrap up tonight, we have Monday Night Football between Tennessee and Miami. I've got Miami beating Tennessee, and at 8:15 from Ford Field into downtown Detroit, we've got the Seattle Seahawks, Detroit Lions. I've got the Lions winning 23-20 over Seattle. And before we wrap up, guys, again, I want to say thank you to my guest, Greg Eno, his third appearance on our show tonight. He is a co-host of the Knee Jerk podcast with Big Al and Nick, and he does a great job on his show. And he's a huge Detroit sports fan, and he's been following Detroit sports teams for many years. And I consider him a friend, and I want to say thank you for Greg for coming on tonight to talk Detroit Tigers baseball with us as well. And I hope you guys can tune in to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show again Thursday, October 3rd, 12 p.m. Eastern, with my guest Courtney Nicole, who is the social media coordinator and marketer for the Underground New England. And it should be a great show with Courtney Nicole this Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 on the West Coast. I hope everyone has a great evening, enjoys the 2 Monday Night Football games, and really looking forward to the Major League Baseball postseason starting tomorrow. And hopefully those 2024 cardiac kids, the Detroit Tigers, can shock the world and shock the Houston Astros. Tarek Screwjoe is going to be starting for the Detroit Tigers, and really looking forward to this as well. So again, thank you to Greg Eno for coming on. Thank you to everyone watching this live streamed on my audio platforms, and to my audience on WQEE 99.1 FM, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership here in Guelph. Have a great night, everybody. Go Tigers, and we'll see you guys Thursday at 12 p.m. with Courtney Nicole.